should talk about the economy. I think they should contrast their views with the Republican positions.
They should be talking about how much things cost in the supermarket, at the gas pump. If they talk about anything else, they're nuts.
Alexandria Hoff live in Washington with the very latest. Alexandria.
Well, good morning. You heard that last soundbite there, and they've been trying to talk about anything else, but inflation is the top issue for midterm voters, combined with recession concerns, and the Biden administration has had to come up with a sensitive response.
Look, it's possible, but not inevitable, and we're doing everything we can to strengthen the foundations of the American economy.
Retail sales, payroll employment, consumer spending, industrial production, all of those have not been flashing red. All of those are not in recessionary territory.
Well, according to the Wall Street Journal's survey of economists, there's now a 63% chance that a recession will hit in the next 12 months. That's up from a 49% probability noted back in July. And you're seeing there 71% of families cutting back on necessities. Now, here's President Biden's take on the state of the economy.
I'm not concerned about the strength of the dollar. I'm concerned about the rest of the world. Does that make sense? Can you explain that? Yes. Our economy is strong as hell. The internals of it. Inflation is worldwide.
So an explanation was needed there because the rising value of the dollar has been widely blamed for fueling inflation worldwide. So that was somewhat of a confusing answer. And what about the Inflation Reduction Act? Well, take a listen.
A lot of Americans are curious when the so-called Inflation Reduction Act will really start to bring down inflation.
So the many parts of the bill will start to take effect next year. For example, there are tax credits for energy to help people weatherize their homes. So we are focused on helping to make that transition to clean energy in a way that brings down energy costs for families.
But with almost three-quarters of Americans cutting back on necessities right now, it's a hard time to consider buying new energy-efficient windows, guys.
Yeah, I'd say so. Insulation, not my number one thought right now if I can't eat. Alexandria Hoff, thank you. So why isn't this White House doing anything to solve inflation? Well, one, it's because of the attitude they have about it. Look at Joe Biden. Our economy's strong as hell. By what metrics, Joe? Everything is a disaster right now, including everyone's 401k. Check out this. This is the New York Post today. 401k because it's knocked out.
Knockout.
I don't know about you. When I get that statement every month, I turn to my kids and say, well, you're not going to college. And I'm kind of joking, but at the same time, there are a lot of people who are going to have to make horrible decisions when it comes to their retirement because their 401ks have tanked.
And here's a part of the op-ed that the New York Post wrote. They say since President Biden took office, monthly savings have collapsed, falling 83%. The average 401k plan had over $135,000 at the start of this year. Today, those assets have shrunk on average to about $101,000. In other words, the average 401k plan is down about $34,000, more than 25% in less than 1 year. And then you also have inflation outpacing pay. So even if you get a pay bump, you're ultimately taking less home because everything is so much more expensive. And part of the Biden administration's messaging is, well, in the Inflation Reduction Act, there are tax cuts to winterize your home. I don't think that's going to make many Americans very happy at the end of the day.
So what is Joe Biden doing? Eating an ice cream cone, looking like an idiot.
You don't have to do that on TV.
I really probably shouldn't have done that on TV in retrospect. I saw myself in monitor over here. But the point is that Biden experience, the ice cream cone and the soundbite, that's a gift to Republicans who are trying to craft those final campaign commercials going into November. He looks as bad as he has been so far during his 2 years in office. That one soundbite and visual make him look even worse, and that's a gift to Republicans.
I know, and then you look at these prices, the price increases month to month. We always get these numbers, and they just paint the perfect picture, an unfortunate picture at that. Diesel fuel up 9.1%, residential natural gas 2.6%, eggs up 16.7%, fresh and dry vegetables up 15%, pork up 5.9%. 5.5%. You know, President Biden always says on the campaign trail he's not going to build the economy from the top down, but the bottom up and the middle out. And that's his way of saying that he wants to help low-income folks the most. But then at the same time, how do you explain things like passing student loan bailouts, which is free money to the richest people among us, which would increase inflation and affect the poorest people in a negative way? So that's why poll after poll shows that the American people do trust Republicans more to handle the economy and inflation.
Folks, this is a recession. The only reason many are still in disbelief or denial about it is because the jobs numbers are still strong. We have seen cracks in that foundation. Jobs are going to be going away. The jobless rate is going to be going up. Maybe at that point, this administration will realize we're in a recession.
One last thing, because Todd, I know that you hate/love this point whenever the president says that other countries are faring better than the United States, because you always say, who cares about other countries? Germany, Italy, UK, their inflation is higher than the United States, but Canada, France, Japan are not. And to your point, no one does care about what's going on in Germany, Italy, or the UK here in the United States. And one of the reasons those countries' inflation numbers are so much higher is because the world economy is dictated by what's going on in the United States.
It's just a ridiculous point he consistently makes, in addition to the ice cream. Now to this. Jury deliberations set to begin just hours from now in the trial of a Russian national, Igor Danchenko, who's facing charges in the Durham investigation.
Brooke Singman has more on what we can expect. Good morning, Brooke.
Hey, good morning, guys. The jury will deliberate on the standing charges against Igor Danchenko after closing statements just hours from now. It comes as a federal judge dismisses one of the 5 charges against Danchenko of making false statements to the FBI. Now, Danchenko told the FBI he never talked to Charles Dolan Jr., a Democratic PR executive who contributed information to the now debunked Steele dossier. His legal team arguing that since he never lent a penny by the CIA, FBI, or any of the other U.S. intelligence agencies that I loyally served for many years. Now, Page was the target of a FISA warrant. The debunked dossier served as the basis for that FISA application and its renewals. But GOP Congressman James Comer says it keeps looking worse for the FBI. Listen.
The fact is the American people have lost confidence in the FBI. It's been politicized for at least 6 years now, and it's going in the wrong direction. Every day, another report comes out that's more damaging to the FBI.
Danchenko has pleaded not guilty to all charges. Carly, Todd.
All right, Brooke Singman live for us. Thank you. Let's bring in former FBI Special Agent and Navy SEAL Jonathan Gilliam. Jonathan, good morning to you. So this Danchenko trial could be the last case prosecuted by John Durham. What is the big picture takeaway from all of this?
So I want to show you something real quick, taking a bit from what we've seen on Fox during election time, right? I want you to look at good versus bad behavior, right? And I want you to concentrate on who the behavior benefits, if there's any transparency in the behavior, how you can track that behavior, and if there's a positive or negative outcome of it. Now, when you look at Danchenko and you look at Durham and you look at this entire investigation, what you see is the sole lying to the FBI. That's basically all that's come out of this. So a couple things are coming out. It's either Durham is just another part of this DOJ because he works for the DOJ. You have to remember that, right? So is he being pressured by the DOJ to kind of mitigate this or lessen these charges and then get rid of this thing? Or is this a cry for help that he's saying, this is all I can do? Because when you look at the things that I just showed you there, who these accusations benefited, was there any transparency? Was there any tracking? Can you track this behavior back to any specific person or groups of people? And is there a positive or negative outcome for the things that he did, Danchenko himself or any of these people involved? And constantly and consistently, it presses back to the DNC, to Biden, to Clinton, and to anything not Trump that is pushed on the left. And it also presses back to the DOJ and the FBI, people who actually praised Danchenko after investigating him in 2009 for potentially being a spy for Russia. And by the way, Fiona Hill, the person that testified against Trump during the ridiculous impeachment trial about a phone call to Ukraine, she's the one who introduced Danchenko to Christopher Steele in 2010. That's very interesting when you look at the totality of all of these things.
A lot of detail there as Jonathan T. Gilliam goes Carl T. Rowe there with the whiteboard. But you alluded to something interesting when you referenced John Durham. Did you think by now that there would have been more to come out of the Durham investigation? Because let's face it, he's been at this for years. It needs to be measured in years, and it doesn't seem like we have a whole heck of a lot.
Well, so investigations typically, when you look at them, they're looking for who this benefits, right? And so you typically want a law enforcement agency that's not associated with the people being investigated. And when you look at the overall the breadth and width of this investigation, many people from the DOJ have been involved with this on the wrong side the entire time. I believe Durham was the wrong person for this investigation. It should have been somebody completely out of the DOJ, quite honestly, if you wanted an honest reporting. And you can go back to the fact that the information in the dossier, for instance, was false, that was falsely used for to get a FISA to spy on American citizens. That shows you that the DOJ should not have been involved with this at all to begin with. So I believe when we look at the totality, again, the totality of circumstances, we see an investigation that has done more to protect those people who have done wrong than it has to convict the people who have done wrong.
And speaking of totality, Jonathan, we do talk to you a lot about how a lot of Americans have lost faith in the FBI, and there are varying opinions on how to get back on track. How do you see it?
I think they're absolutely correct. You know, when you just look at Daschenko, you look at rank and file people who said he was no good, while the executives said he was actually trustworthy and cooperative. When you also look back at when Daschenko supposedly disappeared in 2011, he never left the country. That was a mistake by the FBI that he just disappeared. And then that same individual who worked for a left-leaning Brookings Institute when he was being investigated later becomes basically a source for the FBI to verify the information that he gave them, which never happens. So when you put all that together with fake evidence, with the Mar-a-Lago investigation, the same way that came out, over 500 documents seized, only 370 of those had nothing to do with it. Why could and how could the American people trust the FBI any further?
Jonathan, always great seeing you. Thank you so much for joining us.
You got it. Thank you.
All right, turning now to an update on a tragic crime story here. Chilling body camera video capturing the moment a wounded Bristol police officer shoots and kills the man who just murdered DeMonte and Officer Alex Hamzy, who lost their lives in the shooting by a bogus 911 call. The funeral for the fallen heroes is set for Friday. And the Miami Dolphins honoring one fallen Sergeant DeMonte before yesterday's game. Check this out. The team tweeted this picture of a custom jersey with DeMonte's name on it. The tweet reads, quote, "Today we honor Sergeant DeMonte, a lifelong Dolphins fan who was planning to attend today's game."
Wow. And now to this, reported first here on Fox. Federal filings show Missouri Democrat Cori Bush has spent nearly $500,000 of her campaign funds on private security despite her repeated calls to defund police. In the third quarter alone, she shelled out more than $100,000 on security services, that according to Federal Election Commission records. Bush previously justifying her security, claiming her life had been threatened and she had, quote, too much work to do.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Bush is not alone. Fellow squad members who have voiced support for the defund movement, including Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, and Rashida Tlaib, have also paid top dollar for private security. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis getting slammed by the media for easing voter restrictions in areas hit hardest by Hurricane Ian. Many outlets unhappy after DeSantis' executive order expanded mail-in ballot access and early voting availability in Charlotte, Lee, and Sarasota counties. I thought the left liked that. The Guardian writing Governor DeSantis has made voting easier in certain Florida counties battered by Hurricane Ian, but only Republican-leaning ones. Orange County, a Democrat-leaning area which experienced historic flooding from the storm, received no voting exceptions. NPR also fanning the political flames. Southwest Florida leans Republican, with the counties of Lee, Charlotte, and Sarasota delivering wins for DeSantis and Trump in their last general elections. And Politico calling those areas, quote, Republican strongholds. households. All 3 counties were devastated by the Category 4 storm when it made landfall on September 28th. Hurricane Ian killing more than 100 people in its path. But as they say on the left, never let a good tragedy go to waste. Meantime, another Blue Edge gang member charged in last week's shooting death of a 15-year-old on a New York City subway is being held without bail. This, despite his attorneys claiming Keandre Russell is the victim in the situation who killed the teen in self-defense. Police say J. John Burnett was gunned down when 2 groups began fighting in a Queens subway car when Russell shot him in the chest. He's charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder and second-degree criminal possession of a weapon. Russell's attorneys say that the murder charge is excessive. He faces life in prison if convicted.
And responding to New York's out-of-control crime, Lee Zeldin has promised to declare a statewide crime emergency and suspend cashless bail if he's elected as the state's next governor.
People want to save the state. They want to save New York City. And they're tired of having to wake up every morning and read all of the headlines of a rising crime in their own neighborhood, places where they used to feel safe.
Zeldin and Governor Kathy Hochul are neck and neck in the race, with Democrat incumbent Governor Kathy Hochul at 49%. The Real Clear Politics average shows the GOP congressman trailing by just 5.3%. Former President Trump endorsing Congressman Zeldin for New York governor. Trump taking to Truth Social to say, "I have watched and known Congressman Lee Zeldin for many years. Lee was strong on the border, crime, and our great military and vets, and fought hard to protect our Second Amendment and succeeded. He will be a great governor of New York and has my complete and total endorsement." And Charlie Hertz says crime will drive New York and other blue states to the right.
You know, it's no longer about Democrat or Republican or conservative or liberal or anything like that. Democrats obviously have families that they have to feed. Independents have to gas up. And it doesn't matter your skin color, your gender, your religious background, or whatever. There's this misery affects everybody pretty equally here. And this is the kind of, and then you add into it something like crime, which you're seeing in places like New York. And suddenly, you know, a state like New York, which is as dyed blue as you can get, becomes in play. And I think that we're going to find after November, we're going to find there are a lot of other states or areas that we never would have guessed that are in play are going to suddenly be in play.
Nike co-founder Phil Knight declaring war on Oregon Democrats after investing millions into Republican and independent gubernatorial candidates. Knight criticizing Democrat Tina Kotek and her lax stance on drugs, saying one of the political cartoons after our legislative session had a person snorting cocaine out of a mountain of white. It said, "Which of these is illegal in Oregon?" And the answer was the plastic straw. According to Real Clear Politics polling average, Kotek is leading the race with more than 37% of the vote. Republican candidate Christine Drazen just behind at 34%.
And former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard hits the campaign trail for Republican Senate candidate Don Bolduc, fresh off her exit from the Democratic Party. There she warned the stakes for an election could not be higher. Listen.
The party that's in power in Washington today is a party that is controlled by so-called woke fanatical ideologues who not only don't take their oath to support and defend the Constitution seriously, their policies and their actions are actively seeking to undermine those fundamental freedoms.
We spoke to retired Brigadier General Bolduc last week. He says the Democratic Party is ignoring New Hampshire's biggest issue.
They're not dealing with the 3 biggest problems that we have here in the Granite State: inflation, inflation, inflation. People are choosing between heating and eating. They're not being listened to.
The latest Fox News poll reaffirming that soaring prices are at the top of voters' minds with 22 days until the midterm elections. There is also this. Fox and Friends First exclusively obtaining a DHS memo outlining a plan to recruit a volunteer force to help address Biden's border crisis.
The job description includes basic housekeeping, prescription runs, and personal property management.
picking up the trash, sweeping, and cleaning. DHS says they don't have to have any experience, just a willingness to serve. It will also cover the cost for them to leave their military jobs to go to the southern border to do basic housekeeping, prescription runs, and personal property management. But this is also leading some people to question if this is really the best use for taxpayer dollars. And a policy change by the Biden administration could mean a stop to migrants arriving in New York City by bus from El Paso. There's been around 2,100 Venezuelans cross the southern border each day. Now, in August of this year, 25,000 crossed, compared to the same time last year at just 6,000. The policy now says asylum seekers from Venezuela will be sent back to Mexico if they cross into the U.S. illegally. But right now, only a handful of Venezuelans are being sent back to Mexico, and the reasoning for who gets to stay and why is pretty murky. Meantime, DHS Secretary Mayorkas is blaming Republicans for the migrant crisis at the border. He said the political cry that the border is open is music to smugglers' ears because they take that political rhetoric and then they market it. However, former acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf disagrees.
There is very little border security going on. The borders are open and we're allowing folks to come in. And so that's why you're seeing this increased number of individuals coming across. And now the administration is in a conundrum. They've now got to solve a crisis that they have started. The Biden administration, at the end of the day, they're not solving the problem here.
And of course, you'll remember Mayorkas has come under scrutiny, intense scrutiny that is, lately following those emails showing he knew the reports of migrants being whipped by Border Patrol were false, but he pushed the narrative a few hours later. Anyway, back to you guys.
Ashley, thanks. Let's bring in Brandon Judd, president of the National Border Patrol Council. So, Brandon, it's now Republicans' fault that Biden opened the border, right?
Yeah, completely ridiculous. But this is how Secretary Mayorkas tries to deceive the American public. And because the mainstream media isn't going to fact check him, he's going to continue to get away with this. The problem is he's lied so many times. And because he's gotten away with those lies, he's continued to lie in order to deceive. The cartels do not listen to what's going on. They watch the actions. They know that this administration has completely opened up the border. And because they opened up the border, the cartels are able to go into countries throughout the world, not just in Mexico, not just in Central America, but throughout the world, and they're able to advertise their services based upon the actions of this administration, not what Republicans are saying.
And Brandon, that's not the most unbelievable thing about that report that Ashley just did. Fox News exclusive reporting on the tasks that DOD officials are being asked to do for the migrants. I'm just going to go over some of them again. Basic housekeeping, picking up trash, sweeping, cleaning. There it is on your screen. Prescription medicine runs, migrant personal property management. I mean, are they applying to be concierges at a hotel for these migrants? This is dumbfounding to me, Brandon.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. And again, if there wasn't a crisis, why would they be advertising for services like this? This administration refuses to define the problem. And if they're not going to define the problem, they're not going to come up with the solutions to actually stop this crisis. Rather, they put a Band-Aid on everything by trying to get people to come down to clean these facilities. And let me tell you, these facilities, I see them on almost daily, but they're very, very filthy simply because of the number of people that we're dealing with. We have to deal with a crisis, and we're expecting the administration to give us the resources, the policies, and the programs that are necessary to control this, and they're just not doing anything. Instead, they hide behind the rhetoric of Secretary Mayorkas, which is, again, trying to lie to the American public.
There are literally $1,000 a night hotels that don't offer those services to paying customers, yet we're giving these to people that literally have broken our laws, crossing the border illegally. Some of those people are Venezuelan migrants. And, as you know, President Biden reinstituted his version of Remain in Mexico, sending some of these people back. But these migrants are saying, heck no, we won't go or stay. Quote, if they don't allow us back in, we will go back in, legally or illegally, said one immigrant. No one is going to go back. There's thousands of Venezuelans on their way now. They're not going back. Isn't this just part of an overall approach by this administration that whether you are a citizen who is a criminal or an illegal crossing our border, you just don't need to follow the law in Joe Biden's America?
And that's what's happening. And again, this is smoke and mirrors. You look at the press release that DHS put out late last week saying that they were going to start expelling Venezuelan migrants back to Mexico. It's only a handful that's going on. Later, the very next day, we found out that Mexico itself put a cap on the number of people that could go back. So you look at this once again. It's a way to try to deceive the American people, and should come as no surprise that this is happening right before the midterms. They're trying to tell the American people that, look, we're doing something, elect our people. And if we elect the wrong people, they're going to be vindicated on this border security issue. They're going to say, see, we knew what we were doing. They took a calculated risk that this issue alone was not going to harm them in the midterms. If it doesn't, they're going to continue to go forward the same way that they've been operating for the last almost 2 years.
Brandon Judd, as always, a pleasure. Thank you, sir. Thousands of Army
picking up the trash, sweeping, and cleaning. DHS says they don't have to have any experience, just a willingness to serve. It will also cover the cost for them to leave their military jobs to go to the southern border to do basic housekeeping, prescription runs, and personal property management. But this is also leading some people to question if this is really the best use for taxpayer dollars. And a policy change by the Biden administration could mean a stop to migrants arriving in New York City by bus from El Paso. There's been around 2,100 Venezuelans cross the southern border each day. Now, in August of this year, 25,000 crossed, compared to the same time last year at just 6,000. The policy now says asylum seekers from Venezuela will be sent back to Mexico if they cross into the U.S. illegally. But right now, only a handful of Venezuelans are being sent back to Mexico, and the reasoning for who gets to stay and why is pretty murky. Meantime, DHS Secretary Mayorkas is blaming Republicans for the migrant crisis at the border. He said the political cry that the border is open is music to smugglers' ears because they take that political rhetoric and then they market it. However, former acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf disagrees.
There is very little border security going on. The borders are open, and we're allowing folks to come in. And so that's why you're seeing this increased number of individuals coming across. And now the administration is in a conundrum. They've now got to solve a crisis that they have started. The Biden administration, at the end of the day, they're not solving the problem here.
And of course, you'll remember Mayorkas has come under scrutiny, intense scrutiny that is, lately following those emails showing he knew the reports of migrants being whipped by Border Patrol were false, but he pushed the narrative a few hours later. Anyway, back to you guys.
Ashley, thanks. Let's bring in Brandon Judd, president of the National Border Patrol Council. So, Brandon, it's now Republicans' fault that Biden opened the border, right?
Yeah, completely ridiculous. But this is how Secretary Mayorkas tries to deceive the American public. And because the mainstream media isn't going to fact check him, he's going to continue to get away with this. The problem is he's lied so many times, and because he's gotten away with those lies, he's continued to lie in order to deceive. The cartels do not listen to what's going on. They watch the actions. They know that this administration has completely opened up the border, and because they opened up the border, the cartels are able to go into countries throughout the world, not just in Mexico, not just in Central America, but throughout the world, and they're able to advertise their services based upon the actions of this administration, not what Republicans are saying.
And Brandon, that's not the most unbelievable thing about that report that Ashley just did. Fox News exclusive reporting on the tasks that DOD officials are being asked to do for the migrants. I'm just going to go over some of them again. Basic housekeeping, picking up trash, sweeping, cleaning. There it is on your screen. Prescription medicine runs, migrant personal property management. I mean, are they applying to be concierges at a hotel for these migrants? This is dumbfounding to me, Brandon.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. And again, if there wasn't a crisis, why would they be advertising for services like this? This administration refuses to define the problem. And if they're not going to define the problem, they're not going to come up with the solutions to actually stop this crisis. Rather, they put a Band-Aid on everything by trying to get people to come down to clean these